Good afternoon. My name is Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story, our digital platform that does a deep dive into the biggest issues of our time. Today, we're looking at perhaps what is the saddest and the most disturbing story to have emerged from the shocking Pegasus Leaks phone hacking scandal. We're talking about the woman staffer who leveled allegations of sexual harassment against former Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi. Let's tell you what we know thus far. Bringing up our big story today, we know that a woman staffer who alleged sexual harassment against Justice Gogoi was possibly a target of surveillance. We say possibly because her phone was not submitted for forensic examination, and therefore it is not possible to conclusively say whether she was hacked or not. But what we do know is that the complainant was listed as a person of interest just days after she submitted a 22-page affidavit detailing charges of sexual harassment against Justice Gogoi while he was Chief Justice, charges that he denied. Gogoi had in fact called these charges part of a larger plot to deactivate the post of the Chief Justice, calling it a conspiracy against India's Supreme Court. His denial was upheld by an internal panel of the Supreme Court, a three-judge panel, in fact, that gave him a clean chit. But now we know that 11 numbers linked to this junior staffer could have possibly been hacked. Again, the health warning is could have possibly been, because still these phones are forensically examined, or the devices are, we will not know for sure. Activists, including the lawyer who represented the staffer, are raising questions about the clean chit now. Justice Gogoi, since the Pegasus leaks, has declined to make any comment. On the program today, we ask our panel of experts whether this particular case is now under cloud. One of the requirements of the Vishakha guidelines is the confidentiality of the woman who's leveling the complaint, which could have been compromised if she and those linked to her were put under surveillance. Let us introduce our guests on the program today as we look at really one of the most disturbing dimensions to have emerged from the Pegasus leaks. Anant Dehadrai, an advocate who has represented several other victims and survivors of sexual harassment, is joining us on the program today. Welcome, Jay. We're also joined from Chennai today by Sumanth Raman, who has a series of very interesting tweets, as does Jay, questions really for Justice Gogoi. And feminist activist Dr. Ranjana Kumari is on the program with us, the head of CSR India. Ranjana, before I get into some of the legal dimensions, I want to start by asking you, obviously we have to keep underlining the fact that Justice Gogoi was given a clean chit in this case. A three-judge internal panel of the Supreme Court found him to be innocent and found no basis in the woman's complaint. But that not one, but 11 phones of people close to her may have been put under surveillance. What kind of questions does this throw up for you as a feminist who has spent all your life working on and with victims and survivors of sexual abuse and harassment? And if we can unmute Ranjana, please. Yes.
This is compromising the privacy of a woman who had courage to come out with the story of what happened to her against the Chief Justice of India. And now when we hear, and I do not know what the final analysis will be of the, of after the phones are submitted for forensics, but if it has been done, then I think this is a kind of challenge every Indian woman today who is facing. Not only this is the double crime committed against a woman. Not only that the case was not properly investigated and she never got the justice, but also the person who is being allegedly who did all this has been rewarded doubly by the state, not only by appointing him as member of parliament. So what is the message? The message is that your personal privacy can be invaded into. This is something, and you will never ever get justice. Not only that you will never ever get justice, but no woman in India today is safe. Every conversation that she may have had with her whatever 11 people, who has done this is the question, and why. Who has done this will have to be explained to the country, that how and why her 11 members of family and near and dear ones, their phones have been compromised, and what was the purpose of the whole thing. And once you've already rewarded someone with such a prize of harassing a woman, then how any Indian woman is safe in
So,
this
so, so
country?
let me,
And what
I mean,
justice will any Indian woman get in this
Ranjana,
country?
yeah, Ranjana, you know my feminist impulses, but as a journalist and a moderator, I have to also ask you the contrarian question and the contrary question. And the contrary question would be this: that we do not have conclusive evidence that these phones were hacked. What we do know from this Pegasus expose, which has been led by 16 different media organizations across the world, is that she and 11 people close to her were listed as persons of interest. How does this, some may ask, how does this materially change the clean chit that was given to Justice Gogoi, in your opinion, Ranjana?
Well, the content, we do not know the conversations that happen. We do not know the content. And let me tell you, Pegasus can install any kind of evidence on your phone. It is possible that anybody, they will hack. This is hacking of a phone. So, knowing whatever technology I know, and I'm being on both the major technology companies, Facebook and Twitter's international board, I know that it is possible that the possibility of sending any kind of message from these phones is possible with Pegasus. And then maybe clean chit is given or will be given in future, even if there is an inquiry that somebody has really had, sent all kinds of messages from her phone to show her as a guilty instead of Justice Gogoi as a guilty. So is Pegasus is a very dangerous software which can, meddle with your camera, which can really look at your voices. Everything can be really installed and then used against you. So any evidence put into her telephone and her 11 people who are around her can go against her severely. It can damage anybody, not only her, anybody
Yeah.
in this, any woman, your camera for that matter, your phone, Barkha, can have any kind of message sent to anybody through your phone without you knowing it. And then it becomes an evidence against you. So I think this is the most dangerous thing that one is hearing today. And I can tell you, this is the biggest news, because all of us activists, all of us people have, the people who are dealing with all these cases. If somebody has done all this and we are dealing with those cases, any kind of message go from our phones. So
Yeah.
how is this possible? And I really, there is need for a very serious investigation into this matter, because after all, he's Chief Justice of India. I mean, he is one of the topmost constitutional authority of the country, and he commits a crime and he gets a clean sheet on the basis of whatever inquiry that was done. Everybody already was doubting that inquiry. Everybody had, we've
Yeah.
never cleared our
So,
mind that
so,
this
so
never
for
happened
for
with
le-
phones.
yeah. So just to be sort of legally correct on this, I have to keep underlining that there is plausibility or possibility that the staffer was a surveillance target, not conclusive evidence. But Jay, would you say that there is enough now that we know that actually calls into question the clean chit that was given to Justice Gogoi? And if it does, why? Because again, I ask the contrary question that yes, of course, evidence could have been planted on this lady's telephone or her other devices or those of people close to her. And we should remind our audience that two men linked to her work in the Delhi police. They were suspended and then later reinstated. And we now have to question everything, because any evidence that was found against them in anything could be called into question if they were actually put under surveillance. But as the wire reports, the person in question did not submit her devices. Now, given that she didn't submit her device, we'll never know for sure. What questions arise from this moment in this particular case for you, speaking as a lawyer?
Oh, Barkha, absolutely. I think first and foremost, what has happened is absolutely shameful. And I think the former Chief Justice only now covers himself in even more shame than he wasn't, covered in earlier. And if you look at it even from a very legal point of view, a purely legal perspective, there is no sanctity that clean chit has now. If you look at it from from a strictly legal perspective, you have a clean chit that has been given under sealed cover. A copy of that report was never made available to that victim. We know now that possibly she and her family members were also targets of snooping. And what we do know with great certainty is that she was reinstated. So if indeed she was surveilled by people, we don't know whom, but assuming she was surveilled by the state, they would have known what her communication with the former Chief Justice was. And if on that basis of knowing what the communication that they had between the two of them, despite that communication, she was reinstated. So whose version do we believe? And the Chief Justice, the former Chief Justice, wanted everybody to believe that this was a larger plot and a larger conspiracy against the judiciary. And he is, and after all, he embodies the judiciary. He is the Chief Justice of India. He was the Chief Justice of India when all of this happened. And the fourth most important constitutional functionary in our scheme. And therefore, as master of the roster, you can only imagine how much power, how much influence he exerted on the functioning of the, of the judiciary. So this needs to be reopened, and perhaps it wasn't enough that 3 judges formed a committee. Perhaps this needs to go before a full bench of the Supreme Court. Why should this be kept secret? Why is he any more special than you or I? And is he not subject to the same rules or the same judgments that the Supreme Court itself has pronounced? So he needs to be held to account, and I think he should begin by resigning from Rajya Sabha. I think that's the first thing he needs to do.
He would argue, and he has thus far refused to comment, but perhaps he would argue, or those who gave him the clean sheet would argue, that this surveillance, hint of surveillance does not change the material nature of a complaint, which is that Justice Gogoi had made sexual advances against her will, and thereby being a harassment complaint. The internal committee say we followed procedure, we followed the Vishaka guidelines, there was an internal panel, the internal panel looked at it, did not find basis to it. Why does the fact that she could have been under surveillance change anything specifically? What would your answer to that be?
Well, two things to that, Barkha. One, the guidelines were never followed. She was never given a copy of that report that was the sexual harassment committee that met. The report was never given to her. So how is she to know what transpired in that meeting? And if you recall, she stopped attending those proceedings, if you recall. And they proceeded without her anyway. So, and most importantly, one of the members of the committee was going to succeed the Chief Justice then, who was being looked into, who was sort of being inquired into by this committee. And his name had to be recommended by the same gentleman. So even from a point of view of perceived bias and even actual bias, there are very serious infirmities, very serious problems with that committee's report. And you asked a very pertinent question. You said, what about the surveillance, right? How does that change anything in terms of her allegations? Well, the very simple answer to that is this. Why doesn't Mr. Gogoi reveal the WhatsApp messages that would have been sent to him? Let him make those messages public. He's not, if he wants to preserve his honor and he wants to reveal the larger conspiracy, quote unquote, that is at play here, he should come out with those messages that he exchanged with this staffer, and everything will become clear as day.
Well, Sumanth, here's the irony, and I think it's something you raised in a bunch of questions online today. What happens when someone is placed under surveillance, and if this staffer is that whoever she is communicating with, those people also come under surveillance willy-nilly, even if they're not listed as targets, right? So actually, if there were messages exchanged between the staffer and Justice Gogoi, Justice Gogoi himself, theoretically, could be the victim of surveillance that he is not aware of.
Yeah, in fact, Barkha, as I raised this question online this morning, what actually strikes me as the primary objective behind putting this victim or alleged victim's phone and her associates' phones under surveillance, if at all that is proved, is basically to get more information which could potentially be used to against Justice Gogoi. So I don't see, what on earth could anybody want from the 11 associates of that lady? I honestly can't think of anything. If at all, anything that was communicated between them or between the victim and Justice Gogoi would then have given whoever was listening in, if at all they were, the ability to sort of potentially confront Justice Gogoi with all of this. So I think that is the most concerning part about this whole thing. I mean, the fact that the victim, yes, from the Women's Commission and so on, I agree that that's a completely unacceptable and it's a grievous crime. But from a national perspective, I think that there's a much bigger possibility here. And Barkha, I want to point out one very important thing. Look, if the phones are not going to be submitted for forensic evidence, and many of them have said they will not give their phones, they have lost the instrument, they have changed the instrument and so on. it does not mean that this entire case collapses there. Citizen Lab have the list of servers, both the back end and the front end servers. Now, where were these servers located? Who had access to these servers? Which IP addresses extracted information from these servers? So this is not so simple to say that everything has been erased. And NSO, by the way, did shut down or change many of the servers after the information came out in the public domain. But Citizen Lab managed to find their new servers as well. So the clue that everybody is searching for may not necessarily be in the instruments that were surveyed, but they could be in the information which was transmitted to the particular IP addresses and the particular servers, and who had access or who controlled those domain names, who registered those names. All of that, there is a huge electronic trail which is extremely difficult to completely extinguish, though certainly stuff like whatever the data went, somebody would have certainly taken it off the servers by now. But clearly the trail is still available, and I'm sure that it's a matter of time. I still have a feeling that we haven't heard most of the really damning information from Pegasus Gate, and it could still come out over the next few days.
Okay, I just want to do something I don't normally do, which is reference rumors. And before I come back to Ranjana, I want to take this to Jay. One of the things we forget about Justice Gogoi is that he was one of the judges who came out and did a very unusual press conference. He was not at all happy with how cases were being decided in the Supreme Court. He was not Chief Justice then. And then suddenly, everything he'd said seemed to change when he became Chief Justice. And the rumor at that time in the corridors of power in Delhi, in legal circles, was that perhaps something incriminating, something that would embarrass him, had in fact been found. And therefore, I take this back to my original question to Sumanth. While we're, of course, feeling for this woman staffer who very shockingly has been listed as a possible surveillance target, what if Justice Gogoi himself, in the process, was also a target thereby of surveillance, if there was communication between the two at all, and thereby lending sort of credence to those rumors that were swirling in the capital at the time? Jay? Sorry,
I thought you put that to Suman. No, I think, Barkha, you're right, but I'm not going to comment on a rumor. It won't be fair. But what I can tell you with certainty is this: then if what you're saying, if there were such rumors floating around, then the internal committee and the sanctity given to the internal committee looking into those allegations is only heightened. And therefore, there was all the more reason why we needed a solid, proper committee of all the judges of the Supreme Court to sit on this matter, because it concerned the very sort of legitimacy of our most important judicial institution. And therefore, all the judges ought to have come together in a committee and should have decided this issue. Why was it that only 2 or 3 judges were picked? And thankfully, the present Chief Justice, he thought it better to recuse himself, because he was seen to be a friend of Justice Gogoi, and he himself very fairly recused himself from that committee. So I think it comes back to that, Barkha. What is the sanctity of that clean sheet that was given to Justice Gogoi by that committee? Does this issue need to be perhaps now reopened? Why was she put under surveillance? What was the result of that surveillance? And most importantly, why was she reinstated? If this was a woman who was central to a larger plot to destabilize India's judiciary and perhaps target in some way the former Chief Justice, why was she reinstated? They should have booked her under the appropriate provisions of the IPC, booked her for blackmail and for other things, perhaps even sedition. This would be a fit case for sedition then, perhaps, I would argue. Well, in the light of the fact that Pegasus can plant evidence on your phone, if indeed she was put under surveillance, then anything against her right now would be suspect, right, Jay? So, I mean, that's the point. So therefore, why reinstate her? This is my question. And if you reinstated her, therefore, should her version then about being sexually harassed by Justice Gogoi be disregarded? This is the question. Is we disregarding it? Okay, I've got Karuna. Immunity from sexual harassment, Barkha. This is a question that I think every feminist ought to ask. Did he have some special immunity that protected him, that allowed him to do this, to victimize this woman and her entire family, rather? This is a very serious issue.
Yeah, Karuna, welcome to the program. I think pretty much all our panelists agree that the clean chit to Justice Gogoi is under a cloud. But one of the things that is being raised is that we do not have conclusive proof of surveillance. Even the global expose only says this could have happened. Your first thoughts, and then Ranjan, I'll come to you right after that. Karuna, go ahead.
I think what the very least what needs to happen is that one needs to look at the committee needs to look at the evidence that has been placed, the fact that admittedly, and there's also a case again, there also have been various cases against NSO that sells Pegasus, not with a lot of success so far, but they say that they only sell to governments, right? Also, there is evidence in the WhatsApp case to show that even if you provide a missed call or you send a link, that is sufficient to kickstart the surveillance process by Pegasus. So I think that when you are looking into the allegations, I think it's important to look at the allegations from two perspectives. One, from the perspective of the clean chit that was given to Justice Gogoi, and I think that was completely, it was very difficult to grapple with in terms of due process even then. And I think the main thing that people who are justice oriented and feminists, and I do hope that the speaker before me identifies as feminist, because you know, feminists don't take kindly to being told what to say. But I think that due process in this regard needs to be revisited and revisited very stringently. And the second thing I think is that Justice Gogoi's judgments with the government as a respondent, or with the government as a petitioner, indeed, as a party, is something that needs to be actually looked at again. Because
That
the ground for review is, or ground for even curatives, is bias.
Okay, so hang on. You're saying, and I want Ranjana to, that's a new point, that you're saying not just does the clean chit to Justice Gogoi need to be reviewed, Justice Gogoi's own judgments on other issues vis-a-vis the government need to be reviewed. Am I hearing you correctly there?
Yes, but I think at first they'll have to look at the evidence to examine whether and I think it opens up a huge Pandora's box, right? Because you need to look at the evidence of how robust is the evidence that has been placed, not just by a few media organizations here, although they are highly credible, but media organizations, 17 media organizations, the most credible in the world, right, have come together. And to look at that, look at maybe setting up an SIT that looks into these allegations, because it's incredibly serious and it sort of bashes at the heart of democracy and justice.
So let me get responses to this. So far, literally all our panelists agreed that the clean chit to Justice Gogoi on sexual harassment is under a cloud. You've introduced a new dimension here by saying all of his judgments are under a cloud, and I want to understand from the others if they agree. Ranjana, let me just get you in, and then I'll go to Jay and Sumanth. Ranjana, can we unmute Ranjana, please? Go ahead.
Yes, Barkha. I think it's important to see there has been some quid pro quo like Rafale and then many other judgments where there has been a lot of report on why and how the clean chit was given. And as you know, French government has opened the total investigation again by a judge. So I think it's important to see everything links very well. You know, there is a kind of chain to the whole thing, that his whole conduct, and then the sexual harassment, and then internal complaints committee. I mean, this was really purely something which did not conform to the law of the land, where internal committee is investigating. Because he's Chief Justice of India, there was no external member on the committee. This never happens. This has never been the case where when sexual harassment committees are constituted, you have to have a civil society organization member, but there was nobody doing that. And then the whole thing about closed envelope, nobody knew what it was, and then it was not even shown to the victim. So many things, there are many irregularities that happen, there are many illegality that is there. So why was he rewarded, given this Rajya Sabha seat immediately after he retired from the Chief Justice post? So there is certainly a need. I mean, I do agree with Karuna that there is need I mean, it's an institution under the question now. It's not just this individual. I mean, like, he's been Chief Justice of India, and then to do what he did and to get away with it and get rewarded for what he did because he delivered something. There was some kind of
Okay, I mean,
which he delivered. So why?
I just have to say that we don't have. Yeah, of course, there are serious questions that arose even when the clean sheet was given to him at the time, but those have been, I guess, strengthened now. I want to just get Jay and Suman to react to Karuna's new point. Can we put Ranjana on mute while we go to the others just for better audio? Jay, to Karuna's point,
Barkha, I don't agree with her. I think it's rather premature to say that judgments should be opened up for review or that curatives should be filed in judgments where Justice Gogoi was a member of the bench. Let's not question the credibility of all our other judges, men and women of the highest standards, and there is no reason for us, there is no material or evidence to suggest that they went along with something that Justice Gogoi said. It's rather premature, and I think I don't think it's a ground for reopening judgments, but certainly if the material makes itself available, if there is credible evidence that comes up, then yes, then we should look at Justice Gogoi and in terms of what he's done in terms of criminality. But to say that judgments, because he sat on the same bench, are now somehow tainted and now should be relooked, I think that's irresponsible, rather premature, and I think it doesn't help the institution at all to make such a remark. I mean, with great respect, I don't think that's...
Okay, I'll allow Karuna a brief interjection there because, Karuna, isn't it a very big leap? Right here, we're in a situation where, frankly, we would be lucky if we could get this clean sheet re-examined. If we're going to couple that with saying that everything that Justice Gogoi ever adjudicated on is under a cloud, then you're questioning the entire judicial process and the entire Supreme Court, and you might in fact be reinforcing his argument, which actually said that this entire case was to delegitimize the Supreme Court.
I think the speaker before me has unfortunately set up a straw man and then is attacking it hammer and tongs without understanding, really comprehending what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this, that the first step is to look into and to examine these very serious allegations. If these very serious allegations are correct, and there was a series of illegal, criminal favors that were done to the Chief Justice at the time, was there, one, a quid pro quo, right? If there was a quid pro quo, and this is a very serious process, obviously, so you have to have the highest standards of investigation there, it's akin to a criminal investigation, but even higher, I would have thought. And it's not easy because digitally, it's almost impossible to attribute that Pegasus, that the benefits of Pegasus went to the government. But there are other modes of legal attribution works in a different way. There are various concomitant litigations that are going on around the world. France has just announced that they are going to look into the issue in a very serious way. Given that in our country, we have had a former justice of the Supreme Court that has been involved, I think that it is vital for our various institutions, whether it's the Supreme Court, whether it's the state governments and the criminal processes, because there are many criminal cases here. There are violations of Section 43 of the IT Act. There are potential violations of Section 509 of the IPC, outraging the modesty of this young survivor or the survivor of sexual assault. And potentially also outraging the modesty of the various women journalists and the women, because sometimes what is done is that you're trying to get into the bedroom of the person and see if you can blackmail them, right? So potentially. So what I'm saying is that all of this needs to be examined with a fine-tooth comb and looked into. Now, if there is evidence that is found, right?
Then you say, then the next thing comes.
I'm not saying every case. I am saying appropriate cases. And when I say appropriate cases, it is cases where government was a party. It is cases where, say, perhaps not the constitutional benches where there are many judges, perhaps the benches where the traditions of the master of the roster were shifted and cases were allocated perhaps to a particular bench, perhaps not, perhaps cases where there was a division bench
Yeah,
and
I get,
the senior
I get
judge
what you're saying.
almost always holds sway.
For,
And so I think, experience at the bar really counts here.
But for any of this to happen, it would first need a re-examination of that clean chit. Now, Suman,
Precisely.
yeah, but Suman, just because it won't happen doesn't mean it should not happen and should not stop us from asking for it. So I'm prefacing my next cynical remark with that thing that, of course, we've got to make a noise and express our anger and our disquiet where it's needed. But I am perhaps too jaded to believe that even this clean chit is going to be reviewed. I actually think the government and the institutions and the people who are implicated by suggestion will brazen it out, and we are going to see a kind of zero-sum game here, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't raise all the questions we're raising. We've got to still raise them. So Sumanth, go ahead.
Yeah, Barkha, the sequence of events as I see it is very clear. The first thing that we need to establish is that before we talk about reopening the clean chit and even that stage, is that these 11 numbers were actually put under surveillance. Right now, we only have they could have or they may have been put under surveillance, which is not good enough for us to say, let's reopen everything. So the point is, first, we need more evidence, and that is what I was coming to. If the evidence can come only from two places. One, the phones which were actually the instruments which were hacked, or the servers where the data went to. So somewhere at some point, and I'm sure that that would come out. It is not going to come from our government. It is not going to come from India. But some of these other countries are asking very serious questions. I want to point your attention to one thing. In 7 of these cases, they have identified cross-border surveillance. It is across countries that the surveillance has been carried out. So it's not just that one government was spying only in its own within the confines of its own borders. No. So every country now has an interest. At least every country that claims to be a democracy will have an interest in finding out the truth. And at some point, and my gut feel is, I don't think that such a big expose would have just come out with just, phones may have been tapped, phones may have been put under surveillance, Pegasus may have been installed. I don't think so. I think that the other end has also been tied up. What is delaying the release of that is not clear. Maybe they want to do it in installments over the next few days. But the first thing that we need to establish is, was surveillance done? That is the first point.
But without the device, that can't be done. Without the submitting
No, you don't. No, that's what I'm saying. You don't need the device. You don't need the device. The device is one side. If it is established that data went from the device to the other side, then it's already proven. So you're not going to get many people to come up and give their devices. Some of them may have even destroyed their devices because they don't want this whole issue to, for obvious reasons. So, but I feel that information will come out, which is what will make it very difficult now for the government to completely brazen it out. So you cannot just say the whole thing didn't happen.
So let's take that as a cue to get last comments from others, please. Short comments. We've got to close. Ranjana, Jay, and then Karuna. Ranjana, to you. If it cannot be established, Sumanth is counting on the fact that it will be conclusively established one way or the other. Did the hacking take place or not? I think that it is grave enough that a young woman, well, it doesn't have to be young, a woman who complains about sexual harassment and 11 people linked to her against one of the most powerful men in the country is even listed as a person of interest for surveillance. That is enough. That is enough to raise many serious questions about the process that gave Justice Gogoi a clean chit. Ranjana.
Well, it links it very directly because why 11 people of her family and her close ones? Why? I mean, once you start looking into that, there is for investigation to look into why the family members were their phones were hacked. Why their phones were hacked by Pegasus? Who has really interest in knowing what not only she herself is doing, but 11 people around her are doing? the people who are involved in complaining, there is no other reason. There is no other, they're not people of national interest. They're not people who are very important for Indian politics. They're not. This is the family, and this is the person who, somebody said National Commission. She had nothing to do with National Commission. She was assisting him. So this is someone who was directly, involved. She complained, and Justice Gogoi is the person who really was charged. I mean, like, complainant really named him, and then and the surveillance is against these 11 people of her own near and dear ones. Why? I mean, this directly links and points the finger to someone who's trying to get all this data. And let me tell you, data never gets lost. I think data is always somewhere or the other. All this communication is in some or the other server. So even if you break your phone, even if you burn your chip,
it's in the ether. It's in the ether. And I'm saying, even if we don't get to the data,
if government is interested, only if government of India is interested, only if government of India wants to absolve itself of the responsibility of really buying the Pegasus and putting it on so many people's telephones and hacking it. If they want to tell the nation, no, we are not responsible, then who? Because NSO will not sell it to anybody else. It has to be either government or authorized by government.
And that is, of course, the macro investigation.
So who?
Sorry, I'm cutting you short. I'm running out of time. Jay, your last thoughts. Are you saying the Supreme Court could suo motu pick this up, and do you expect it to?
I think, Barkha, you're right. I think the Supreme Court will pick this up. I have a feeling I think they might take this up as a suo motu issue. But I think just to sort of go back for a moment to what the lady before me, the earlier speaker, said, I think it's very tempting to jump to conclusions. And conspiracy theorists, unfortunately, are a dime a dozen in our country. And to just assume that there is going to be, or that there was a quid pro quo between Mr. Gogoi, between Justice Gogoi and the government, I think is again another sort of fallacy at play. I mean, we're jumping to conclusions without any material or evidence. But what we do know, and we know for sure, is that there was an investigation, that there was a committee that met, that there was possibly surveillance, and despite that surveillance, she was reinstated. So perhaps what that lady said, there was an element of truth to it, and therefore Justice Gogoi's version should be disbelieved. So this is what we can glean objectively from the facts that are before us. And I think it will be very good if the Supreme Court takes up this issue suo motu, because it relates to the health of the institution. This is important for democracy. It's important for us as citizens. Yeah.
Okay, Karuna, quickly, last word. Karuna, mute. Can we unmute her, please? Yeah, go ahead.
This is an issue that is larger than any of us. It is larger than any institution because it goes to the heart of justice and the separation of powers. This is an issue where the rights to privacy of our Supreme Court judges, the Article 21 rights of our judges, are under threat. I'm going to leave Jay and his straw man to entertain themselves. But I think what's really central here is for us as a polity to ensure that those rights are sacrosanct. Why is that? Because let us take an example where somebody, a Supreme Court judge, say, has a consensual affair. And according to me, that has nothing to do with their judging, right? That has nothing to do with, it's not criminal, that has nothing to do with their judging. But what if at any cost they don't want their children to know? Or what if they have a disease and they want to protect their children and their families and their wives from it? What then? What if the government knows this? The government is the largest litigant before the Supreme Court. This is about Justice Gogoi, but it is about the basic rights of our judges and the basic structure of our constitution and the separation of powers. I think an investigation into this issue is absolutely vital, and it must be of the highest standard. And I think that all different institutions, and most prominently the leadership from the Supreme Court, is required here.
I think that's a note on which we can all agree, whatever the other variations of perspective may be on this conversation. I think all eyes are now on the Supreme Court to actually see whether they will pick this up on their own, which would be the best way to proceed, not wait for the government, not wait for anybody else, just pick this up. This affects the legitimacy of the Supreme Court and also really speaks to the trauma that any woman goes through when she has to take on someone powerful and speak about sexual harassment. Thank you, Karuna, Ranjana, Sumanth, and Jay. And thank you to our audience. We have much more on this developing story. So do join us again in about 10 minutes from now. Much more on the Pegasus leaks coming up in just a few minutes. Thanks for watching. Good night.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.